So for the Starfish server, that one you should be able to log into as well. And in terms of like what we were doing, log into it here real quick. Like when we were doing those adjustments with the queries and all that good stuff. Um, yeah, yeah, for sure. And actually, if I were to go into all the actual code related stuff, I probably need to push up some changes as well that I haven't like fully committed back to the repository. And I mean, what's nice about these overall, they're all generally following the same pattern, right? So aside from changing the name, the script, if you make a copy, they all need the Oracle connection. Most of them may, well, this one in particular needs ODS, so this is probably a bad example. But like, let's say the users one, right? The users one, um, and these differences between test and production probably aren't like super necessary because we don't do a ton on the test side, but they're in place. And basically what that gets used for is down here at the bottom, it does run it twice each script when it runs. So it runs it once for production and then it runs it again in the test mode. So all of them, yeah, yeah, yeah. So we have the files, right? So each of them is kind of semi-uniquely named. So this is the user's text one in this case, but that would get adjusted. This stuff would stay the same. This one stay the same, same. But really where things might get adjusted, maybe like this little piece here, you know. Um, Obviously the query part, which is this part here. And then like these other little file paths, and then of course the format of whatever that file needs to be. So like this is where it ended up creating extra work, like on mine when we were making those script adjustments, because like when I pop into this part, right, which is where I was able to plug in kind of like your query updates. This part is relatively straightforward, right? Like this wasn't too bad, but like I could just take all this and delete it, plug in your new query, and assuming everything was fine there, we could just like, let's say the more recent ones, right? Like the ones where you've been making these kind of like real minor adjustments. That's all it's been. I just come in here, plug in the new query, and we're good to go. Um, where it ended up causing a little bit more work was, remember how we had those adjustments to like the column names and whatnot. So those did cause a little bit of adjustment here, where I had to add in some new ones, maybe comment a couple of the old ones out that weren't being included anymore, and then coming back over here where it generates that the file part, and actually kind of make those additional adjustments as well. So, but once that was done, um, then you kind of go back to that mode where if you're just making a minor update to the query, you can just update that one little piece, and that's all you have to do. Yeah, and so like the main things, so you can run and do the debugging directly here within VS Code. Yeah, yeah. So what was weird though is that like on the PS script server, when I kind of went through that transition process, moving like things from an old server to that server in early 2020, I was able to do most of that process directly in VS Code, including like the debugging. But what I started to notice is that like when I would do the debugging in here, sometimes VS Code would act funny, like it would hang. It didn't really seem to run the script. So like that might be resolved. I don't know. I haven't tried it really so much since then. So what I've been doing instead is that like, okay, I might do my edits, get everything prepped, and then I'll open up the actual PowerShell ISE, and that one it seems to be helpful to run it as the administrator as well, because sometimes it has issues with the files, like the text files that are getting generated and accessing them if you don't. Yeah, so you'd think it would just kind of do it. Yeah, yeah. Windows is interesting like that at times. But what I'll do in these cases is I would just run it in here, or I might add like the little breakpoints if I do really want to like debug something or not kind of like fully run it if I can avoid it. I want to just see something, is correct before I do like a full run. Because usually once I'm ready to do a full run, I'll kind of take off the breakpoints and all that because I don't really want those interruptions. But yeah, so I'll definitely run it like in here to just see, okay, how does it go? No, if you run it here, it's actually running, yeah. So that's yeah. So that's also why like here, let's say I might add a breakpoint like right here after we get the data. Um, because I'll kind of maybe want to examine, did we get it out of the database correctly? If there's something there. But usually if there's an actual issue with the query, as it's running this step, we'll get an error down here at the bottom. So it'll just say, kind of like when you run a query in SQL Developer, and if there's a problem, it tells you. It would be something very similar to that. So, and I think the main ones that we ended up running into before were just like the ones that in some cases they needed like the ban inst one like prefix and stuff like that. Those were, like the minor things that kind of would crop up on them, if I remember. Right. And then like for like other scripts, like when you're in that development mode for them, I definitely take advantage of like the breakpoints a lot more because I'll typically know, okay, things are working up until this point for sure. Or if it's like something where I have a loop going on, I'll put the breakpoints in that loop. That way, um, I can at least run through a couple of them like slowly, and know, okay, each step is kind of doing everything that I'm expecting it to. Because quite often with the PowerShell stuff, sometimes you don't know like 100% upfront like that things are going to be working. So you kind of do want to run through it, right? So like there's definitely been times over the years like when I was developing like the stuff for the student emails, let's say, like there were a couple of students, usually the ones in the A's that were at the top of the list, that ended up being the guinea pigs inadvertently, just because those are the first records that were being processed, and I used those to kind of slowly just build that confirmation that things were working as they needed to. Yeah. And that's, well, I guess I could have done it a different way, right? Like in some cases, I probably did use like test9 at some point in the early days, but pretty much I want to say I don't use test9. uh, well, it's hard because they don't typically make it easy to transition between the two systems, so you're kind of ending, especially like with TDX, right? Like any of those changes that you had to make manually in the interface or in Starfish, for example, like you end up having to just redo all that stuff in the production. Yeah. So yeah. And so, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's a lot of the reason why we kind of like went in that direction. But hopefully this is just kind of like another, little intro. I know it's not a full one, but mhm.